I'll say one. Well, my name is John Ilmari Aalto Jr.
Ilmari?
That's well, as far as documents I found. Yeah, it's a Finnish name.
So you're Italian?
It's Finnish. I always wanted to be Italian, man. I did. And that part of the family, my mother's part of the family, a little Sicilian in there, and very good food. You know, 6, 7 courses at any Thanksgiving. As far as
we don't.
So, well, I guess you know, my interest in art is like any young man's interest in art, comics. And that goes back to the golden age of comics, Stan Lee, Jack Kirby. I vividly remember being a kid up in Mount Jewett, Pennsylvania, with a population of 75, 80, maybe 100 people. Outhouses still existed, black and white TV was there. So, being able to sit down with a frosted glass of root beer and read The Amazing Spider-Man was a delight. It got me very interested in art. And as time passed, evolved from comics. Another thing that I enjoyed immensely, the Metropolitan Museum of Art put out a series of books with illustrations in it that you could take out of it and just impress the world out of me. A lot of stuff that I still like Delacroix. I just find a lot of energy in his paintings. I always enjoyed his paintings. So in terms of coming down to Sayville, I came down to Sayville in 6th grade. I was living on what's called the FAA station. If any of you are familiar with the FAA station, they used to actually allow people to live out there. My father was with the FAA. And during that time, I started making some friends. I always seemed to gravitate to artists. Paul Dolan, just a fantastic artist as a young man. It was kind of scary, when anybody, everybody I know is like 5 times better than I am. It's kind of hard to get started. So a lot of my art initially was sort of mercenary. I did it for a reason. In high school, I ran an underground paper, and I did the illustrations for that paper. So that was like one of my starts as far as getting going. There was a teacher there, Larry Rivers, well, I'm sure he thinks of himself as the Larry Rivers, but he's was just one of these wonderful men.
He was my teacher.
Wasn't he great?
In Sayville.
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, he's one of those people that would come.
Sayville Elementary School.
Seemed intent on inspiring you. And that was after. I don't know if you remember the art teacher before that, who. And as I advanced in age, and this being my birthday, and I'm
Happy birthday!
59, I'm seeing that receding horizon go by, but you could tell that she had done her duty as being an art teacher, and she was pretty much done.
What was her name?
Before Larry Rivers?
Yeah, before Mr. Rivers. Yeah, well that goes back to, you got to think, late 60s. I graduated 71 from high school. With that said, when I went to Suffolk Community College, I was a cartoonist. I was in the Compass, so I was writing articles, I was doing cartoons for them. And again, it was like a group of people. Gavin was another artist that was there who was doing a cartoon that was this side of amazing, and I went about and did my own thing and enjoyed it. I've always loved art. I've always surrounded myself with art. In fact, you may have seen my van if you were of that time period. I had taken an old Econoline van, took off a Bel Air station wagon, fused it on top of the other, and then had Paul do a mural all the way around this thing. And amazingly, I was only once did the police ever come up to my vehicle and say, "What's going on here?" And that happened in Ohio after I was coming back from the Mardi Gras, and we just kept running out of gas. And as we were doing that, it was kind of like, okay, who's going to call whose mom? Who's going to get money wired here? And we were picking up hitchhikers, and eventually we got back to Long Island, and here I am. When I went to Stony Brook, I was very impressed with Tibetan art. Stony Brook had the Institute of Advanced Religions in their library. And it's kind of like one of these things you wander into. It was a moment in time. You figured that was the early 70s, like 3 or 4. And the Tibetans had been, you know, trying to get the hell out of China for obvious reasons. And a lot of that art came to America. And one place was Stony Brook. They literally, you could just walk in and they just had illustrated religious texts. All, you know, feel free. Oh, you showed up. Well, wonderful. So, you know, that was another thing that had a lot of influence in my thinking. One of the things you'll see in Tibetan art is you'll see water, fire, and they'll use that kind of in repeating design patterns to kind of give a sense of energy. And you'll also see that in, like, if you've ever been to a Greek church, where you'll see they literally will have the frescoes, and you'll have your saints with shimmering gold in the background to kind of, after an hour of listening to any sermon, no matter how good or how ceremonial it is, something like that kind of catches your mind, drifts you away. That's always been of interest to me. But I guess that gets down to me actually doing art, which is a case of picking up a brush and starting. Somebody had mentioned Rydick, Evelyn Rydick.
Yeah, she worked.
Oh, she was great. I took a course with her as far as doing initially a Rembrandt like anybody else, and I also did Delacroix, I guess. You know, again, one of my favorites. Kind of led me to do something else. There's a place on the North Shore called the Finishing School, and if you're talking about glazing, you know, you're doing wall treatments essentially, but you're doing multiple glazed wall treatments. So, you know, in terms of that, it's what does one color look like over another color. And, you know, these are just exercises that they had us doing. And, you know, as far as formal training in art, I've been on the other end of it. I've been a model at Stony Brook. And that was interesting. But I haven't really had...
Were you a nude model?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Yeah. But art, you know, it's what they do in art school. Well, and thinner at the time.
Yeah.
So, but with that said, I know you guys like realism. This is kind of a realistic. This happens to be by the Bohemia Church. It was convenient. And so, you know, I did want to get modernness in it, because this is what it is. It's a parking lot right in back of the Madonna. You know, so this was done in 1980, and I mean, on one note, my grandmother is buried like right about here. That happened later, but oh, she lived a long life, happy life. So, you know, in terms of that, that's one of my early paintings. I also was involved with user groups with computers. So I don't know how this translates, but this is from 1986, and it's a little cover I had done for our newsletter, the Long Island Atari User Group, which I was president, founding member, ran for any number of years, and they actually still meet. And again, I was doing like a cartoon back then. I'm not sure that you'd find it funny, but it's called Remarkable, and remark is something in programming that when you want to take a statement out of a program or put information in there, you put a rem statement. Just as a way of bloviating. The model hacker ponders hardware configuration of computer makeup. I liked it at the time. Yeah. Well, I've been involved with computers for pretty much a long time, as soon as I could afford one, and that happened when somebody rear-ended me. My little Honda Civic, one of those micro things, I used that money to get myself an Atari 800. I've had a computer ever since, and I've worked in the computer field. This is kind of just a loose drawing from '84. Thank you. So, you know, I love my cats. You know, the time has passed, they've passed on, but, you know, I still have fond memories of them. And with that said, this would be a little later, this is '91, and this would be a case of midnight, squeaky, a little bit of my wife. I really didn't do a full drawing of her, but you know, I know the proportions are out of sync a little bit. You'll always find that as part of my art. One reason is that I always find myself thinking about the process of vision. So, like, you'll notice that my head is tilted right now, and that's often the case. Somehow the brain just does that marvelous thing of recalibrating. You know, it's a ceaseless wonder to me that if you really think about the optical part of vision, that much. Everything that we see happens inside of our head, and it's got that transparency that it's, unless you're in a fever or some other state, you know, you're not going to, like, see the edges of where that goes wrong, you know, in terms of, like, wait a minute, this might take a few minutes. But, you know, that's always been an interest in me. When I was at Stony Brook, my field was psychology. So perception, sensation have always been of interest to me, and you know, even this is 2006, and I just can't help myself. You'll notice that the frame seems a little tilted.
Yeah.
This is actually a picture of a picture on my digital camera that I decided to paint, and you can see the computer there. Yeah. Which actually has another picture of something that I was painting, but this is the canvas that I was about to start on. So, you know, it's got like a few layers of it, and kind of like, I guess, the French used to do stuff like this, where, you know, you have somebody at a window, their hand hangs over. I found myself doing that. So, stuff I like, and I don't know why anybody else would like it, is where we go from here. So, bear with me. I did 4 paintings that I call Lotus Lake, and you know Russ Pizzuto, I'll fall upon his idea that you're not really showing a specific thing. I wanted to get the feel of water, like a spring on a lake. There is a Lotus Lake in this area, by the way. We used to drive our vehicles back there, yeah. And then there's also Sansui Lakes, and you know, it's just a popular place to drive back to. These would be 2 examples of that, and you know, it makes up a series of where I'm painting, and I don't mean to say I'm just enjoying the act of paint. I hope I actually create an image that's at least interesting to me. I don't really show my art, so yeah. So who are you to judge me, huh? Again, this is also part of Lotus Lake in terms of the images. I'm also a big fan of and it's funny to me at this time, Monet, where I just find myself going back and looking at his stuff. And if you don't look for the content of what he's painting, if you're not looking at the haystacks and you're looking at the brushwork that he does, my God, you know, he just blows me away. Not that I'm comparing my work to what he does. It's just I enjoy irregularity. I enjoy a looseness, a freeness in my painting. A lot of times when I'm painting, it's as much to relax as it is to do anything else. Which kind of brings me to this. And please, somebody let me know when time runs over. But
We'll let you
John,
know.
those oils or acrylics?
those are oil.
Okay.
I like oil, and Evelyn gave us a recipe of stand oil, Daymar varnish, and Terps.
Terps.
You know, and my problem was I always made it too wet. Larry Johnston and Nick Y both kind of wised me up to liquid, and wow. And, you know, another reason I love videotaping this group, you always, even if I don't apply it, which obviously I haven't, the depth of knowledge with the group and the things that you find out by watching these videos. And I see these videos 3, 4 times. You know, anything I'm editing these videos when I'm taking a video of it. So between the demonstrations and the artist profiles, it's been great exposure. You know, I certainly am very pleased that we're finally to a point where we've got them up on YouTube and they're easy to find. On my site at least, J-A-A-L-T-O is the correct spelling of Aalto. And you could find my other videotapes up there. I do a lot of videotaping of local musical groups. So, okay. I think we've lost all sequences in time, which is fine, because I'll put a painting aside and I won't touch it for 20 years. It's fine, it'll come back to life. When it starts talking to me, when it starts rhyming with other paintings I've got, and you know, I've got a dialogue going with it, then at that point in time I'll start going back into it. Classic, right? This one I like. I brought this in one time, and Freddie was kind of like asking me, "What the hell were you thinking?" When you or as Carol said, as far as the psychiatrist might think about stuff like this. For me, it's loose. I was listening to a lot of Sonny Rollins, who's a jazz artist. You know, just one of those amazing jazz people out there. So, you know, this had that feel for it. This is called Poppyopolis. I had told him that it kind of reminded me of Dorothy and the poppy field, listening to Sonny Rollins. Freddie is a realist and cared not for that explanation. Thought that I was indeed, you know, pulling a chain of some sort on it. But, you know, honestly, I enjoy this kind of art, and I understand its particularities in taste on what people will think about it. But just as some sort of proof that, you know, I've always kind of been there. This goes back a little ways also. This is called Digger, and it's based on a clam digger's rake. As a young man in Sayville, one of the things you did was you got on somebody's boat. You got like a floating rubber tube. You took your bushel basket out there and you made money. Good money. Of course, now there's no clams in the bay, and you know we live with that legacy. But with that said, you know, it had its own odd impact, because you got to think that a lot of us had enough money to buy canvas, to, you know, have parties where we literally took a roll of paper. You know, when the doctors used to put paper on do they do that anymore?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we used to take out, for any party we would have, we'd take a roll of that, put it up on the wall, and have like 5 or 6 or more artists just drawing stuff. You know, and that was like part of the party. So it wasn't just, you know, wasn't just sitting there on a couch looking at, you know, wanted to engage. And again, I've always known artists. I don't doubt that I always will.
You were going to talk about the hanging one?
One on the wall.
Oh yeah.
You
Okay.
segued out of it.
All right. So here's where I have problems with this thing. I'm usually 2 places at the same time. Like I was clam digging, but I'm a vegetarian. So I was like a vegetarian clam digger. So, you know, I kept finding myself in those kind of situations. Like in high school, I was running the underground newspaper. I was also the senior class president. So, it's all I'm protesting against.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So, I've just always, it's always been part of a mixed message for me on what I'm doing.
On the wall.
I'm going to go with this. Part of my heritage is being Finnish, as in Finland.
You're not finished.
So my middle name is Ilmari, and that's actually, the Kalevala is the root text of a mythological text of the Finnish people, and Ilmarinen, and N-E-N is kind of like Johnson in Swedish. Ilmarinen is a god. Oh, I like that. But it's such a sad, woe-begotten god. One of the things he does is he creates these, it's called the Eternal Smithy. A couple of things. He built the Ark of the Sky. He also was the Eternal Smith, and what he was creating was something called the Sampo. The Sampo is a multicolored, three-sided object that produces wealth. In Finnish, that seemed to be salt, money. I guess they had money up there, and I believe corn. And so it was like three. Well, I don't think it was corn actually. I kind of like had to fill in the third with something. But the idea was that the Sampo would generate wealth. This is I call this the Great South Bay Sampo, Great South Bay Wave Sampo. The reason I call it Bay Wave is because if anybody is interested in, the blankets.
Quilting?
Thank you, quilts. There's a quilt called the Ocean Quilt,
Right.
the Ocean
Ocean
Wave,
Wave.
which is a pattern that I particularly like. In fact, the first video I gave to this place was a video of a quilt show out in Watermill. So quilts have always fascinated me. So anyway, with this, I was thinking a couple of things. And one thing is that if you know anything about computers, computers started with textiles. Textile looms were the first programmable devices that were made. That's where your original punch card comes from. So I know, I had that in the back of my mind, that fabric and color, like Surratt uses dots to bring colors, optical blending of color. I wanted to just do as many lines of color next to each other to kind of like just jam your brain. You can't really see the color that's here. You can go different distances. It will always change. The other part of it is the psych major in me knows that the eye is not only rods and cones firing to show color, it's also seeing angles. You're pre-programmed to see, essentially for movement. So if something changes, as far as distances and such. So, that's another thing I wanted to do. I wanted to like just make this so much in motion, but since this is a first Sampo, it's what I call a broken Sampo. These lines here are just to crack it. So it's the final Sampo years away, maybe not my lifetime even, but I'm going to revisit that at some point in time. And I did work on, like this is a triangle essentially, just one part. The Sampo ultimately fragments after a battle that's over a sea, and all the different Sampo bits fall into the water and spread across the world, bringing peace, harmony, and credit cards.
There's a method to that.
Yeah, so
There's a method to that.
there's some thought in the back of there. I'll have to, of course, watch the video to get some semblance of that thought. This would be another example where I'm taking that ocean pattern in it, but this is Brown River's Rain. I tried to have like the movement of patterns within it, so that you kind of almost had the feel, at least in the red squares, of like water dropping. In here is ASCII code. ASCII code is computers don't really think in zeros and ones, just so you know. It's really about just noticeable differences. The difference between the high of a wave, the low of a wave. what's ground and what goes above your baseline. So why that's important, I'm not quite sure, but this is hydrokinetics, spelled out in ASCII, buried in there, which is kind of one thing I just like to do. So in terms of this kind of like had my finish side. If you look closely, this is also got little patterns in the white. It's intentionally meant so that you don't really see it unless you look carefully, as much as I can intentionally do anything. But yeah, that was also part of when I went to the finishing school to learn, you know, applying technique. Just to prove that I've actually been part of the group at any point in time. This is a quick sketch from the sketch night. You know, and something I recommend. Walter has tried his best to be the good devil on my shoulder as far as inviting me down to stuff like this whenever I run into him in the Ace Hardware. But with that said, you know, it's another one that I have, which thankfully brings me to another point. For a while I worked in the shipping department of an art group called Metropolitan Art. Aside from the notoriety that they received for forged dollies, Dolly forged his own stuff. I mean, we used to joke that he made one set for every continent, including Antarctica. You know, but Dolly knew how to make money, and in fact, one of the things that yeah, I don't think you can see this in any detail. This is when I had like 5 sticks of pastel in one of those little kits, and just didn't know any better or any good artists on that, but it's fun. And with that, I was introduced at Metropolitan Art to a lot of a range of art. One of the more profound moments I had was these guys had 2 levels of art. One was selling to dealers in the city, one was starving artists. Come to the airport. Buy your starving artist art now at a special discount rates. These starving artists can't be starving any further. You know, it was an interesting thing to walk into a warehouse of pretty decent art and see that warehouse continue down an aisle, and you could ask for a specific type of art. Oh yeah, wait a minute. Get their little cart, go down and pull you out like, you know, oh, you like Italian Renaissance pictures of Venice. Hey, well, you know, so, and these guys would go across the country, set up their little shows. A lot of them were like synagogues would have these shows, and you know, that was one part of the art. And there were a lot of good artists. God, there's a lot of good artists. I mean, we prove that every time that we have a artist profile here. There's always something interesting with the artist. Some people go a little bit above what we would consider norm, and it's more commercial in terms of the desirability, and that's a great part of the art field too. For me, not so much, and I kind of understand that limitation. But seeing the art world, one thing I got to see was Moreau did these aqua tints. And I really didn't even know who Moreau was. You know, he's a Spanish artist, very loose technique, almost abstract to the point of silly annoyance. But you actually see a piece of work where somebody who knows their craft, you know, did it. It's just a different experience. And I also enjoyed one thing we were selling at the time, other than a Rockwell, the marriage license, which was a study that they decided to sell as if it was an original. You know, they printed out a whole bunch of these things, and it was Norman Rockwell, hey, you know. And you know what, Norman Rockwell, maybe he had a bad day, I kind of doubt it. He was very diligent in the art that he put out, and a lot of it's quite beautiful. But also, Salvador Dali again, and when I was young, that kind of, I grew up on surrealism, Dadaism, you know, and then kind of like found out that, oh yeah, the Italian Renaissance happened too. And then the Northern Renaissance, probably more interesting to me. Albrecht Dürer, just you know, phenomenal antidote to the twisting, twirling, naked bodies of the Sistine Chapel. As good as the Sistine Chapel is. But you know, that exposure to all phases of art was just one of those invaluable moments in times that you get to look at that amount of art. I think I'm pretty much going to sum it up. God's sakes, I see people nodding off there. This is just fun. This is where, you know, I wanted to do an old apple tree that had been in my yard. I think Gloria might have taken it down. It just went one day. But it was just kind of a fun thing. This, I kind of think I was in a Motherwell kind of mood, if you know Motherwell. The dark, the black, the
Robin.
yeah. They did the Spanish eulogies, which are tremendous works of art. Not to suggest that this is anything, but something that will hang in my private studio in my cottage out back. I have a private studio / storage out back. I have an old summer cottage that for a while we rented, and it's now, you know, it's whoever grabs it first, and my wife is just a little slower to the mark. So my stuff is spread out and made it impossible for anything else to happen. And I probably should start summing it up pretty quickly. Ugly, right? I mean, kind of crazy.
What,
Oh, is it upside down?
Yeah,
I don't know. I might not have signed this. This is a work I call Cupid, and that's, again, I'm very interested in informational technologies. The Incas used to do their writing with string, and they used different color strings, they used different knots in their string, and that was their entire basis of their writing system. There was no papyrus, there was no clay tablets in what they were doing. I just, you know, this is one of my favorite works, but you can't see the sunset
Can you
from
turn it
here.
the other way too?
Oh, yeah.
Which way would you
You
like?
start seeing like an elephant's head.
there you go.
So this is the winner?
You know why? Because it looks like the
Because when they look at it, they see something.
Well, wait a minute. What is my bid for this?
Yeah.
Some sort of film or something like that.
oh, he had it send it.
I actually have made some money on art. For a period of time I was doing glass etching, and of course I brought nothing black, so there's really no way to see.
The back of one of those.
That's Mirumoto Musashi, a Japanese samurai.
Engraving or sandblasting?
I used not the walnut shells, but there's another abrasive like walnut shell, so I'm using an airbrush, you know, to do it. You cut the stencil.
This is glass?
This is my that van we talked about earlier. It didn't get away completely.
I like that.
Nothing should be wasted, right, John?
I found that in my garage and I had to bring it in. I'll give you one last thing, because I probably
that
said
one I like.
as much as I could say. A lot of times I'll just be playing around with art. I'm working towards something. And this is from this year. I call it Ping, P-I-N-G. If you're computer network literate, pinging something is one way to kind of send out a signal to see if something's there. You know, and again, it gets to my idea that computer, you get used to the idea of zeros and ones. The computer at the nano level is as sloppy as anything else. Again, a 0 or a 1, it depends on the differentiating of whether something is on or off. And you could define that any way you want. If you decided red was 0 and blue was 1, you've got your language, your binary language. You could actually, literally write code if you then had a machine that understood color on it. Not to get too far with that, but
Do you name everything?
I've even named this.
Very good.
I've even named the squirrel in my backyard in Antonio. So, yes, I name everything. We won't go too much depth about that.
Okay, what's that one?
I like that.
Oh, this is wave.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, well, these are kind of like as much studies as anything. And this is really, you probably can't tell why I like this. In the background, there's a mint green and an olive green in kind of a pale color. And I wanted to put it with red because, we're talking opposites and the eye just kind of like, starts twitching at some point. And that's what I look for in my art.
Making the audience twitch.
Once I see the audience is squinting and their eyes are twitching, I feel that I may have accomplished my goal. And this is kind of something I'm working on now. Now this is kind of, I got hijacked. A bit of family history came up where I found myself, instead of, I wanted to go back to do a certain thing with that art. But you're going to notice
Color.
the colors, even a little bit of the formation there. This is Newport, New Hampshire, which is where some of my Finnish relatives live, and this is kind of like a valley. I'm calling it Sugar River because one of the reasons my relatives were there was there was a when you're in New Hampshire, one of the reasons that you had mills up there was you had fast-moving rivers. And when you have fast-moving rivers, you put up a mill, you make textiles, then you have like, socialist worker party starts organizing. It's a little bit part of my family history. So, I had gone up there to do some research on the Finns of Newport, and again, I had no intentions of starting to do realistic-ish. This is not realistic. Freddie would have a conniption. There's no perspective to this. And if there's no perspective, it's not a realistic painting. Thank God Freddie's not here tonight.
We'll send him the video.
Yeah. No, John's editing, so we can take that right out.
Okay. Yeah.
That one
I
over.
The
can't
one on the
imagine
east.
that's from 1981, and again, this is just to show that I've had a bee in my bonnet from early on. There was no hope, Walter. There was never going to be a teapot with proper reflections. In fact, this is like a digital watch.
Oh, yeah, you go.
For the day, and I love my digital watch.
Now I see
it showed the future was here. All those Tom Swift books I had read as a youth were coming true. I could now calculate 1 + 1 on my wrist. Now I have a lot of sympathy for acabuses. I really think we should bring those back. I'm going to kind of leave it at that. If you have any questions. Polite, easy to answer questions. Yes, ma'am.
Why the right-hand corner is one color, the two colors, they're all the same and not the rest of it?
Yeah. No, I actually drew this out with a felt marker on it, and I wanted to have something that shows that if I wanted to do a quilt, I could have done all that color. It would have been probably a very nice
Okay.
would have been a very nice painting. But if you think of the Great South Bay, you have a lot of different currents in the Great South Bay. There's not just calm water. You know, there's Shinnecock Inlet. There's rough days. There's just the whole. And I guess I'll leave on this. So this is almost like a good a talisman for the Great South Bay in my mind. Was that the bay has taken such a hit. Over the last 40 years, that I've been around here, that I just kind of like felt, well, it's not going to do a lick of good, but I was just kind of thinking good wishes for the Great South Bay, and a lot of my good memories are with the Great South Bay. Craig Strong, I don't know if anybody knows him. He was president of the Blue Points clam oyster company when they were closing down, and he was like very bright man, microbiologist, and we would talk about the bay, and it's I know it's pristine, it's beautiful to go out there, but there's an entire life underneath that top layer that's kind of been lost. And so peace, love, understanding, all these things are just part of my
What do you call that one, John?
This would be the Great South Bay Wave Sampo. And again, the Sampo is a Finnish object that produces wealth for everyone. So, if you ever need something to just waste your time, kind of, it's a marvelous piece of literature in about paragraphs. Then there's the old witches start doing their incantations, and incantations can go on for many a page, and then you get back to the story. Like one of the stories with Ilmari, the guy who makes the Sampo, and whose my middle name is kind of after. One of the things he does is he gets a bride, and the bride is made out of silver and gold. And it's kind of like, oh yeah, that's going to be great. Oh, bride, silver and gold. Well, guess what? A bride who's made out of silver and gold doesn't really do much for you, unless you're going to chop it up and put it on the black market. What is it going to do for you? So it's kind of like the thought of what's valuable in life. How a living person should be valued more than wealth per se. So a lot of great lessons if you have the patience to read through the incantations of the witch of the north who has her say in this and so on. So, but with that said, I did paint like other paintings in reaction to this, and I find myself doing that a lot. Where I'll start one painting, like these 3 paintings I showed you, and then that 4th painting. I'll do those paintings, I won't care why I'm doing them, just do them, I enjoy them, and then I'll start looking at them, and then, move on to whatever else I paint. But with that said, yes?
How did you get hooked up with the Metropolitan?
I'm not directly the Metropolitan, it was Metropolitan Art, which was a group of guys who know other guys. And like I would drive into the city, delivering, like Moreau, Dali. I'm trying to think there was one artist who was very into doing geometric work.
Mondrian.
No, well, I did see some of his work, but no. Well, Kandinsky they actually sold. A lot of it being Jewish taste. As far as what they were doing, a lot of synagogues were involved. Chagall, stuff like that. But did I wander off the point? At this point,
Hooked up with them?
my friend was working as the head of shipping, and he said, "Hey, we need somebody. Come on down." So I started packing. I learned how to pack art, and fine art. At that, because some of it's shipping, and you've got to do certain standards for international shipping, to make sure that when it went, it went, because you got to put like insurance on these things and such. But the end result is that you know, you could get crass about it, because you get pull a card. You know, hey, here's 50 Kandinskis, yeah, thump. You know, oh yeah, we'll need 25 of the Lincoln and Dolly Visions, yeah, all right, thump. You know, so you just kind of like, it's just an artifact, because I got so much respect for art in general, and love to have, you know, I've got like, I actually have a couple of wet paint artists work at my house, you know, where I've, Maston,
Lillian
Lillian Maston, I like her work a lot. I've got a couple of her pieces. Nance Elfenbein, if anybody remembers Nance. Yeah, she was held a watercolorist. So, you know, I try to bring art into my life, but to just see it as a commercial enterprise, where literally you're picking up a palette, you know, hey, a palette of your Rothkos here, and, you know, to put a different spin on it. But a lot of people buy poster art, and you know, that's great. It's one of the most marvelous things that happened in the 20th century, was that art became available. You know, it was no longer that you had to like just take a magazine, cut out something, and decoupage it onto your wall. You know, by the time I was like going to college, they would literally have poster days, you know, where there were just a gazillion posters on the wall, and everybody would buy something because you could afford it. You know, granted, I couldn't afford the frames to put in there, so thumbtacks were my best friends. But with that said, Metropolitan Art was a great source of frames for me. I got like dozens of frames. A lot of the paintings I've got in my house are framed thanks to Metropolitan Art, because people wouldn't like a frame. Pop it out, you know, it gets put in a pile. Oh, you guys want this? Sure.
There was a lot of competition in those days. There was a place called Rose Art,
Okay.
which was off the expressway in Farmingdale.
Yeah.
And they did the same thing. They would pack so many Kandinskis and so many, you know.
Well, they knew what sold, for one. I mean, that was the
And
honest
ship
part
it
of
all over
art.
the country.
You know, they knew exactly what was going to sell, and you know, they could give you it by the truckload if that's what you needed. You know, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but it certainly was interesting to see that amount of art, you know, like a warehouse full of art, and to know that everybody has different tastes, as shown by the works I'm presenting tonight. What do you consider tight?
I think that's tight, that's discipline.
Oh, yeah.
That's all
Quilt.
discipline. Are you in a different kind of a mood?
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of this is meditative in its own way, where I'm
You're
trying.
free and easy on this one. You're more relaxed.
Yeah, that's a little harder to say. Sometimes the painting can be loose, and it'll be the Dickens. You know, where you're just saying, oh God, I can't put another line here. If I put another line here, it's going to destroy it. And granted, the road line will still be the same, and the horizon will still, if there is such a thing. But you know, a lot of times I'll hesitate on painting. I'll just find myself stopped cold on abstract. More so with my realists. I'll get to a point where I'll you know, have it will all be done, the colors in, and I just can't put the eyeball in the cap. Can't bring myself to do it. Bring that in someday. It's a great painting, it's just it's not finished. But I'm not selling it. My wife, there's no room to hang anything, even if I did finish it. So that goes into a pile that's in my little cottage out back. I have an old summer cottage that I was renting for a while. You know, so I live in a house that's like from the 30s.
Is she an artist too? Your wife?
John,
I think she is.
do you work in series, John? Do you stay with one particular technique or style or painting for any length of time before moving, or do you bounce around?
I'll say I bounce around, because at the same time I was doing the Madonna. These would have been like around the same time. So, you know, you know, again, that gets to where I'm
Like
never admit that you're schizophrenic in public.
The Lotus Lake series, were they done consecutively? Or?
Yeah. No, because I was just thinking of like water. I love water. I love motion in water.
Now, when you're working on those, are you just working out of your head? Are you working from photos for inspiration, or?
I'll say working out of my head only because I can't think of a photo that looks like that. But you know, you spend a lifetime looking at stuff, and all of it goes somewhere.
And all of a sudden,
mine's just not as categorized as other people's as far as, you know, what I do. But you retain all that images. And again, like I was talking about the Tibetan art, if you look at their art, they'll use wave patterns over and over again. And a lot of it's to almost lull your mind into a state of mind. Kind of like Rothko. Have you ever seen a Rothko painting?
Yeah,
and there's no lines. You can't focus on a line other than the edge of the painting. You know, but you find yourself staring at it. And to me, that's like halfway to a religious experience on some of Rothko's paintings. You know, where you get absorbed into a state of mind through the color. You know the old saw, red, somebody might be angry, blue is peaceful, you know, all those colors. Well, you know, everything's in context. But there's enough truth to that. Again, you know, I don't think of myself as being able to see optically. You know, everything that happens within it's a neorealism in my brain that's generating what I see. So, you know, I just always find that kind of fascinating. But
there was input at some point in time.
Yeah.
It's all been processed.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm sure you know, like a lot of your paintings deal with tranquil water scenes, and you know, I mean, you've seen enough water that you could paint water if you needed to. Now, if you didn't put any land near any of that water, and you didn't put a duck in the water.
Your Lotus Lake series, they were very naturalistic. They looked like they could have been inspired by actually having been there, rather than just maybe a visual memory.
Yeah, I don't know, yeah, I have to think about that. Do I have to? I just want my birthday cake. I don't want to.
Are we keeping you from your birthday cake?
No. See, one reason that was a good choice to come tonight, I know that January 17th, we always have 3 feet of snow, and it's 20 degrees below zero. Every birthday I've ever had, that's been the case. Why? You know, why? Why, Lord, is it nice and everybody shows up?
Because I said so. No.
This big one on the behind you.
Can we hold it down a minute here? I have some questions.
I kind of like that. Is that kind of recent or?
No. Aalto. Well, obviously I have to sign this to have any value to it, but I would say this was like, I actually showed this.
Yeah, I think I've seen that one.
It's AB5, and I'm sure you've collected all of the, you know,
brochures.
the flyers that we give it the last 15 years. This is
It's probably 7 or 8 years old.
Yeah.
Because that's the last I think we saw anything of yours.
That's when I see the cat and the bird.
Cat, bird.
The cat is up at the right-hand side, and the bird is on the left-hand side.
I always thought that this was more like maybe for see, like this could be like if you were at maybe a golf course.
Oh, okay. I heard that, and the bird is over you with the orange.
John,
Yes.
the nice thing about that is every time you look at it, you could see something different. That's the, you know, that's.
Yeah, that's a lot of the reasons I like abstract. You no longer, you're not held to seeing something. You know, which is fine. I mean, one of my favorite painters is Fairfield Porter, who's God Almighty. You know, if there's anybody I could, you know, steal from, if I was that competent, he'd be somebody. He's also a great writer. If you want to know anything about the abstract expressionists, well, that period of time, he's like one of the best writers, and considering that he does mostly naturalistic, he kind of like came out of the Pierre Bonnard and Villard, who were French intimist painters. He was in that tradition, but his choice of color is so dead on in the mix that it just, every time, some things can bring tears to my eyes. Monet has brought tears to my eyes. Boston, I saw one of his, he did a painting of a flower pot, of all things. Looked unfinished. It's literally one of the best paintings I've ever seen. My wife didn't kick me or anything, but that look you get, when you stood in the gallery too long and you're fixated. I mean, there was a row, and the funny thing was, there's a row of Cezannes, but it's all oranges. There was like an orange with an apple with an orange with an orange with an apple. And great painter, delightful painter. Ah! I could just go running out of that gallery. It was just, you saw too much of the one thing. You didn't see the spot on thing that he would do. But that little Monet, just so cute. So lively with it wasn't like solid colors, it was like almost like a line drawing of a painting. It's just phenomenal. I mean, I also enjoyed the Sargents and the Winslow Homer. I mean,
There's a Sergeant's Madame X right now at the Metropolitan.
You have very good taste in art.
Yeah, well worth going to see, I imagine. But you know what? You look closely at his work, and some of the gestures, or where the cloth is abstract, abstract, dead on abstract, but it just gives it life that it wouldn't have had if somebody tried to paint, the material exactly the way it is, which is because humans don't see things statically. You see things in motion. You're moving. Your head's moving. You're thinking about pink elephants. And once you say that, you're thinking of green elephants. But you're always thinking something's like going on in the head. Everything's in motion, and the people who can capture that, the Favres, were like Duran, Andre Duran, Matisse. Oh my God. It's amazing to see that kind of art, and you find yourself kind of reorienting and saying, maybe I should be a little looser with my art. It's not really a thought that I've had.
We've all had that.
But there's a kind of like a willingness to say to yourself, you know what? It's time to be a little open to what I'm seeing here.
You mentioned jazz before. Do
Sure.
you listen to a lot of music when you work?
Yeah.
What else do you listen to besides jazz?
My favorite musician would be Captain Beefheart and his Magic Band. Any fans in the audience? Okay. Yeah, well, Frank Zappa? Okay. Frank Zappa had a friend, Don Van Vleet. Don Van Vleet took music and turned it upside down. I mean, your bass player was playing your guitar leads, your drummer was playing your harmonica parts. It was rooted in blues, but it's the most avant-garde stuff. He was also an artist, and in my mind, he reminds me of like William Blake. I don't know if you've, because William Blake wrote poetry and art, and I mean Blake's art is an interesting, iconic kind of grab to it. I mean, you see like where, is it Newton that's got his little caliper, that he's reaching down and measuring things as rationality, and you got poems going along with it. Well, Don Van Vleet was that to me. Unfortunately, the man died last year, but he's probably musically one of my favorite people. But Talking Heads, David Byrne, of course. Would be stuff that I'd listen to. David Gray, if I'm feeling moody, and people haven't patted me on the back enough. It kind of depends. I can listen to. I'll listen to classical, Debussy. I mean, if you want to paint, put on Debussy.
Yeah.
They'll just, you know, the hours melt away. You know, so I mean, there's plenty of beautiful music out there. Always love putting something on with art. And yes, a lot of these works directly reflect that. And I just didn't, you know, what can I say? You know, again, like I guess this was the one that I mentioned, Sonny Rollins. If you want to listen to a great horn player, Sonny Rollins is just got an award, presidential award. He's one of those guys who, one of his albums is called Way Out West, where he does a musical piece that's got a kind of a hokey but he starts blowing the horn and he'll just take it in 3 different directions. And you're going like, how the hell does anybody, you know, dissonance, a melodic line, just going all over the place with it. You know, somebody like that, it kind of makes it easier for you to like lose your mind.
Yeah.
So, and apparently I've been very successful.
Very good.